Hi guys, thanks everyone for joining. There's only a few of you, which is fine, obviously, but I thought we'd just kind of get started, and obviously other people can join as it goes on. Um, in case you guys haven't joined one of these workshops before or you kind of forgot, my name's Lottie and I'm doing these on behalf of Empower Education, who are a brilliant tutoring company who work with primarily lower income families to kind of provide a bit of extra educational support, which is always helpful, especially in times like COVID, because even now everyone's back at school, we've missed so much like education being in person, and any kind of support is always brilliant, especially regarding GCSEs, which I know can be really stressful for some people. So I'm hoping these can kind of take a little bit of stress off anyway. Like I said in the email, we're doing transactional writing today, and I was surprised because actually a lot of people don't particularly know what that is, or maybe they do, but they don't know it under transactional writing as its name, which is absolutely fine. But let me get my PowerPoint up. I apologise for the quality of this PowerPoint. I'd made a very lovely one, and then it all got deleted because my laptop restarted, and I was very upset. So this one I've kind of just had to make do, I'm afraid, because otherwise there'd have been no PowerPoint at all. But yeah, I'm trying to load this up now, and of course it's not going to work. Here we go. So transactional writing and kind of how to make a top band response. The first thing is always that I like to go through is where you're going to find this regarding your exams. It's in the paper, it's in the second paper of your English language topic, so English language paper 2, which is about writers' viewpoints and perspectives. It's an hour and 45 minutes long, the same as the first one, and it's in section B. It's the same as creative writing, but in that paper. Like, it's not creative writing, but that's where it would be. And also similar to creative writing, it tests your AO5 and AO6 abilities, which we will go through later. So another question that I wanted to answer is what actually is transactional writing? Because that was something that a lot of people didn't seem to understand. Transactional writing is kind of the opposite to creative writing, as in it's more formal writing. It's more things like it's not strictly fictional prose, and it's other things like letters, reviews, articles, I'm trying to think of more now, emails, anything like that. It's more like formal or less, even though you're probably going to be writing something fictional, it will be in a more laid out way. It's like a newspaper article or a pamphlet or something like that. So yeah. Oh no, what's happened? Come back. Yeah. And it's set for a more specific purpose. So in your creative writing bit, you'll be like, your school is having a writing competition, write a creative story about this. But in your transactional writing part, it's more like oh, there's a newspaper that you're like a journalist for a newspaper covering an issue of like bullying at schools, write a newspaper article that will cover this topic. So it's given you a much more specific purpose to write about. And that way it gives you a more specific audience, which personally I find super helpful, because otherwise, if I don't know who I'm writing for, I tend to kind of go off on a tangent. So for me, this was super helpful. Like I said before, this includes your AO5 and AO6, similar to your creative writing. AO5 is still content and organisation, which is 24 out of the 24 out of the 40 marks in this paper or in this section, which is content and organisation, which includes communicating clearly and effectively, adapting tone and style to suit the desired audience, and organising ideas using structural and grammatical features. So communicating clearly and effectively obviously just means kind of not making it confusing. Like, this is what is happening, this is what I'm writing about, and this is how you're going to read it. It's as simple as that. Adapting tone and style to suit the desired audience is kind of what I was speaking about earlier. If you know that you're writing where 14-year-olds are going to see it, that's kind of closer to your age group. Think about how you'd want something written to you, or like, even if it's like, oh, 16-year-olds are going to be reading this, write it how you'd want to read it. But if it's like the manager of your company is looking for someone to write them to give someone a promotion, you need to write them a letter and convince them to give you one. Obviously, you're going to have to be much more formal. It's probably going to be to somebody older than you. And that's kind of why you'd use different language there than you would in something that was to younger people. And organising ideas using structural and grammatical features, kind of quite similar to that. Like in a newspaper specifically, like obviously you don't have to write it in columns, but it's like you're going to have like a headline, you're going to have what's that one? It's like a sub headline, and then specific paragraphs about things. It's going to be quicker, it's going to be snappier, because you kind of want to draw the reader in. But if it's a letter, obviously you've got the address on the right-hand corner, the body of it, all of that stuff. And AO6 is technical accuracy, which is worth 16 out of the 40 marks for this section. And that's using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures to ensure coherence, accurate spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So again, like the creative writing, your vocabulary is still so important. Using words like nice and good all throughout your writing isn't going to get you the high marks that you're aiming for. So make sure you're learning all these brilliant vocab words. Those of you that were here last time or have watched the YouTube video know that what I said is I stuck a massive board up with like words that I thought were going to be useful, and I put it next to my bed. And in my head, I never looked at that again. But by the time I got into my exam, I was like, hold on, I know all these words because I just glanced at them every single day without even realizing. So in my opinion, that's a really, really good way to kind of be learning words just passively. Like, you don't have to actually put the effort into learning them. They just kind of go into your brain. And then using sentence structure. So like I was saying about a newspaper, you're going to have kind of snappier, more witty sentences to kind of draw a reader in. Whereas in a letter, it's going to be more complex, probably more complex vocabulary as well. So it needs to suit whatever you're being asked to write. And obviously there's marks for SPAG, so spelling, punctuation, grammar. I just wanted to go through a few specific things that they could ask you to write. And I think I chose specifically letters and articles. So I started off with letters just because this is one that often comes up, which is, I think personally this is my favourite one actually, just because there's so much more you can write in my opinion, but everyone's different. So a letters tend to have a formal layout. So your return, I'm sure you've all written a letter, your return address is in the top right corner, you've got the date of writing underneath, and then addressing it using the correct title. So like sir or madam, or a name, or like Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, anything like that. That's just how you need to lay it out. Sorry, there's something in my eye. I promise I'm not trying to roll my eyes at any of you. But yeah, so it's that kind of formal layout that, oh my gosh, this keeps happening. There's a very specific way in which it needs to be laid out, and that's where you're going to get your marks from as well. If it's an informal letter, so it could be like writing a letter to a friend, you're going to use more colloquial language, so that's much more like less formal. Like, it's more of a discussion. You're probably going to use some humour, you might use some jokes, anything like that. You're not going to be like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're, sorry, that's such a bad example, but you're not going to be sat here speaking as if you're speaking to your manager because they're your friend. But on the flip side, if it is a formal letter, like writing to a manager or a company or something, you're going to have a really good list of vocabulary that's appropriate. I was saying to somebody earlier, if you're speaking to a friend, you're kind of having a casual conversation, and then you're throwing in all of these vocab words that don't really fit, just don't use them because it doesn't flow. But when you're writing a really important letter or something like that, you need to use this vocabulary as much as you can, really, because it kind of all fits in. Make sure you're polite and it's well addressed. And this is where you're really writing for a purpose. So like, it could be for a promotion, it could be because you think you should get hired by their company, it could be because, I don't know, you're applying for something, it could be because you want to do something, like anything like that. There's going to be a specific purpose you're writing it for. And a big thing with this actually is knowing the difference between how to sign it, yours faithfully and then your name, or yours sincerely. And I was taught this in year 4 and I've never ever forgotten it. If you use sir or madam, use faithfully. It's such a stupid way I was taught it, but they just said to me, sir faithfully. And I was like, oh my God, sir faithfully. So if you say sir or madam, you say yours faithfully at the bottom. And if you say like, oh, dear Mr. Smith or something, or dear Tom if it's a friend, yours sincerely at the bottom. That's it. Yours faithfully for a sir or madam, yours sincerely for a name. I don't know why I remember that, but I just always have. Articles, so this can include things from like brochures or magazines, newspapers. Newspapers tend to be the main one that this is going to kind of apply for. So I kind of wrote the point specific to that, but this can apply for like brochures, pamphlets, leaflets, anything like that, really. Always include an interesting introduction as to what you're writing about. Because imagine like it's about, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like something about a new band. You have to write an article about a new band for your newspaper or like for a brochure or something. You're going to have your title, which should be quite like short and snappy. It's going to draw the reader in. And then the introduction is going to be like, this amazing new band, like hype up this band. If you're trying to write that they're good, hype them up. If you're trying to write that they're bad, immediately start putting this band down. Don't ignore the introduction, because it's in an article. It's one of the most important things because they tend to be a bit shorter. And select colloquialisms based on the formality of the task. So a lot of the time in a newspaper, some of the articles are quite informal. I don't know. I know nobody really reads newspapers anymore, but on like the off chance I'll read an article on my phone, some of them are quite funny in a way. Like it's almost like they're talking more to you, which I guess is kind of done on purpose. I'm assuming some of you have Snapchat. I don't know if you look at the Snapchat articles sometimes, but not many of them are formal. They're more like they'll use much more informal language so that more people can understand. If you're using really, really specific language, imagine like it's a newspaper. People from all over the world, not all over the world, but like all over where you live, are going to be reading that. And they're all not going to be super duper intelligent or like the same age as you. You might have kids reading it that aren't going to know what half these words mean. You might have people that aren't as educated as you that don't know what these words mean. Anything like that. So kind of select your vocabulary based on what the task is. Like I was saying before, newspaper articles especially, and like brochures and leaflets, often include some form of humour or wit, so maybe like a sarcastic comment or even just a joke or something like that, or giving somebody a funny nickname, obviously not an offensive one, but just like a funny nickname. The title might be quite funny to kind of draw the reader in, anything like that. Don't know why I've gone back. And like I said before, catchy headline to grab the attention, because that's what you're going to be marked on. It's going to draw the reader in and make you want to read on. And this is where a variety of sentence structure is really going to be your best friend. Because if you're reading an article about something, say it is about a band, and you're reading it and it's all just like the band blah 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 blah, blah, you're going to be like, okay, this is so boring. But if it's like the band's name, fantastic, brilliant, fresh, like you're going to be more inclined to read on if there's a variety of sentence structure there. And this is where you really need to kind of play into that. And just some top tips. I'm sorry, this is actually going to be quite a short workshop just because it's quite hard to tell you how to write one, but there's obviously some tips that I can give you and tell you what you're going to be marked on. It's hard to say this in creative writing. You can't go, this is how you write it, because it's so up to interpretation that it depends on what you want to write. It depends on your writing style, but there's obviously the things I've been saying kind of apply all over. So yeah, some of the top tips that I thought of were try and use as much ambitious vocabulary as possible, but in an appropriate manner, like we were talking about before. There's no point in slipping it in when it just makes no sense. But always, ambitious vocab is always going to boost your marks. And remember the purpose for writing. I often did this until I actually got to my exam. I learned how to do it just before my exam. If you get confused, like I would always be writing something and I'd be writing tons, and then I go, hold on, I haven't actually answered the question here. Like I haven't considered that this is for a newspaper that's going to be published to a school. I haven't considered that this is for something going to my manager. Like you need to remember why you're writing it, and that's going to morph the way you write it. And the way you structure your text is important, and it depends on what you're being asked to write. So like we were saying before, letters, address, date, who it's to, body, yours sincerely or yours faithfully, name. But a newspaper is obviously different. You've got title, subtitle, maybe a body here, body here. You might even have a little picture. It depends on what it is. And finally, be confident and creative with it. Something I personally struggled with this and creative writing is being confident, because I'd be writing something and I'm like, I just feel so stupid writing this. Like, I'm not actually writing to a manager that's going to give me a promotion. Like, this just seems so silly for me to be writing. But when you kind of forget about that and you just engage yourself, if any of you are really good at drama as well, I'm sure you'll be good at this. Imagine you actually are somebody writing to your manager to get this promotion. And I promise you, it just works. Like, you just need to kind of push out how silly you feel in your mind and go for it and be creative. Obviously, you're probably not going to be writing to a manager to give you a promotion when you're 15, 16. So that's why you have to kind of be creative and think about it from a different perspective, because that's kind of how you're going to build up marks. But yeah, I think that's all I've really got for that. Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen. And does anybody have any questions that they'd like to put in the chat? just before we I feel bad that was such a short workshop, but that's not a problem. Like I said, there's only so much you can really say, because there's no point you sitting here going, and this is how you write a letter, and you might write it in a complete different way from me. But the fact of the matter is, you need to use that vocab, you need to use the sentence structures, you need to include the styling and stuff like that. So the basic points are the same, it's the content that you're going to have to come up with. Yeah, I don't think anybody has any questions. So obviously, if you do, feel free to email me, or if you have any other questions, just email me. I'll always be happy to reply. But other than that, I hope you'll have a really good rest of the day, really good rest of the week, and hopefully I'll see you all next week. Oh yeah, and if anyone has any specific things that they'd want me to do a workshop about, please do email me as well, because I'm ideas are always super helpful. But yeah, I'm glad. Oh, helpful. Thank you. But yeah, I hope everyone have a good day. I'll see you later.